Hey, both of you, stay right there. You match the description of 2 suspects from robberies in this area.
We live here. This is our house, 2714. That's our address.
I didn't ask where you live. I'm telling you. You match the description. Step over to the curb, both of you, now.
Officer Marcus Tilley had a habit of stopping people who didn't fit his idea of who belonged where. And on the night of October 14th, that habit finally caught up with him. He cornered 2 black teenagers outside their own home on Garfield Crest Drive, accused them of matching robbery suspects, and treated their front yard like a crime scene. What Officer Tilley didn't know was that inside that house was an undercover FBI agent who had been waiting his entire career for someone to make exactly that mistake. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from here on Bodycam Revealed. And if you believe that a badge should never be used as a weapon against innocent people, hit the like button and subscribe to Deep Truth. This story is just getting started. Garfield Crest Drive sits in the kind of neighborhood that real estate agents describe in carefully chosen words. They say established. They say quiet. They say family-oriented. What they mean is that the lawns are manicured, the driveways hold 2 cars minimum, and the homeowners association sends letters if your trash bins stay out past Tuesday morning. It is the kind of street where people know each other by first name, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, and where on most nights, the loudest thing you'll hear is a screen door closing. Garfield Crest Drive sits inside the Pembroke Hills subdivision of Crestwood, Ohio, a mid-sized suburb approximately 14 miles east of Columbus, home to just under 31,000 residents. The street itself is a curved, tree-lined road off Pembroke Connector, running parallel to the Crestwood Nature Reserve. The houses here were built between 1991 and 1997, colonial and craftsman style mostly, deep lots, mature oak trees, the kind of neighborhood that takes decades to look the way it looks. Number 2714 sits near the middle of the curve. A 4-bedroom colonial with a navy blue door, a stone walkway, and a porch light that Camille Brennan leaves on every single night her boys are out. She has done this since Callum was 14. She does it without thinking now. It is muscle memory. It is love made into a habit. Callum Brennan was 17 years old, a junior at Crestwood Academy on Pembroke East Road, and the kind of student whose teachers remembered his name long after he left their class. Not because he was loud. Callum was rarely loud. They remembered him because he was precise. He asked questions that made other students shift in their seats, the kind of questions that suggested he had already thought 3 steps ahead and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. He carried a 3.8 GPA, ran varsity track, and had already begun corresponding with 2 university programs about early enrollment options. He was, by every visible measure, exactly the kind of teenager that adults point to when they want to talk about promise. His brother Desmond was 16, a sophomore at the same school, built differently in temperament but no less sharp. Where Callum moved through the world with a kind of quiet calculation, Desmond moved with feeling. First, he laughed easily, wore his emotions close to the surface, and had the kind of energy that made rooms warmer the moment he entered them. He played JV basketball, had a weakness for documentaries about ocean life, and had recently started teaching himself guitar from YouTube tutorials in his bedroom every night after dinner. He was, in the specific and irreplaceable way of younger brothers, the one who made Callum remember to laugh. On the night of October 14th, both boys had attended a birthday party for a classmate named Jordan Avery, held at the Avery family home on Sycamore Ridge Court, approximately 2 miles from Garfield Crest Drive. The party was supervised, well-lit, and ended at 11:15 p.m. when Jordan's mother, Patricia Avery, began turning off the outdoor speakers and handing people their jackets. Callum had texted his mother at 11:08, leaving soon, ordered the Uber, and Camille had replied with a single word: good. Then she turned the porch light on, if it wasn't already. The Uber dropped them at the base of their driveway at 11:31 p.m. The driver, a man named Gerald, who had a pine tree air freshener and a podcast playing low on the stereo, confirmed the address before they got out. Callum said thanks. Desmond said, "Have a good night." They stepped onto the stone walkway and heard the car pull away behind them. For approximately 45 seconds, everything was exactly as it should have been. Callum noticed the cruiser first. It didn't have its lights on, which was the thing that registered wrong before anything else did. It was moving slowly, too slowly for someone just passing through, rolling along the curb on the opposite side of Garfield Crest like it was reading house numbers. Callum had spent enough years in this country, in this skin, to know what that specific kind of slowness meant. He didn't say anything to Desmond yet. He just stopped walking and watched. The cruiser belonged to the Crestwood Police Department, Unit 7 of the evening patrol rotation, and it was operated that night by Officer Preston Garvey, badge number 1142, 6 years on the force and currently assigned to the Pembroke Hills and adjacent Crestwood East Patrol Zone. Garvey was 34 years old, broad across the shoulders, with a close-cut beard and the particular posture of a man who had decided long ago that authority was something you performed with your body before you ever opened your mouth. He had joined the Crestwood PD after 2 years with a private security firm and one unsuccessful application to the Columbus Division of Police. His personnel file, which would later become very relevant, contained 2 prior complaints from residents, both filed within the last 18 months, both involving black men stopped in Pembroke Hills, and both marked, reviewed, no action taken. Garvey saw the 2 teenagers from across the street the moment his headlights swept the curve. 2 young black males dressed for a party. Callum in dark jeans and a clean white jacket, Desmond in gray sweats and a burgundy hoodie. Standing at the base of a driveway on Garfield Crest, he ran the address in his head. He did not recognize them. He had decided, before he touched the radio, before he rolled down the window, before he crossed the yellow line and angled his cruiser into their driveway entrance, that they did not belong here. This was the decision that would cost him everything. He did not know that yet. He rolled his window down and put the vehicle in park. "Hey." His voice carried the flat weight of someone who expected to be obeyed. "Both of you, stay where you are." Callum turned slowly, hands already moving away from his body. Not because anyone told him to, but because 17 years of being alive in America had made that movement automatic. Beside him, he heard Desmond go quiet in the specific way he went quiet when something frightened him. "We live here," Callum said. His voice was even. He had practiced even without knowing he was practicing. Garvey stepped out of the cruiser. One hand rested near his belt. His eyes moved over them the way an inventory check moves over a shelf. Quickly, dismissively, looking for what didn't add up. "Yeah?" He walked toward them. "What's the address?" 2714, Callum said. "Garfield Crest Drive. That's our house." "Mm-hmm." Garvey didn't look at the house. He looked at Callum. "Got some ID on you?" "We're coming home from a party," Callum said. "We're students. We live here." "I didn't ask you where you came from," Garvey said. "I asked if you had ID." Desmond shifted beside his brother, and Garvey's eyes snapped to him immediately. "I said stay where you are." "He didn't move," Callum said quietly. "Don't tell me what he did." Garvey's jaw tightened. "We've had 3 robberies in this area in the last 2 weeks. Both suspects described as young black males. You 2 match that description. You're out here past 11, and I don't recognize either one of you from this block." "We've lived here for 9 years, Callum said. Garvey looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached for his radio. Across the street, on the 2nd floor of the house at 2709 Garfield Crest, a light was already on. Nadine Pryor was 51 years old, a school administrator at Crestwood Elementary on Junction Mill Road, and a woman who had lived directly across from the Brennan family for 7 of the 9 years they had been on this street. She knew Camille Brennan from the Neighborhood Association. She had watched Callum and Desmond grow up through her front window the way you watch the seasons change. Gradually, and then all at once. She had seen Callum go from a boy on a bicycle to a young man who shoveled her driveway without being asked. She knew Desmond's laugh from across the street. When she heard the cruiser stop, she looked out. When she saw the officer approach the boys, she put down her book. When she saw Callum's hands move away from his body, that instinctive, practiced, heartbreaking gesture, she picked up her phone. She did not call 911. She called Everett Brennan. Inside 2714, the house was quiet the way it gets late at night. The kind of quiet that isn't silence, but settling. A television murmured somewhere upstairs. The kitchen light above the stove was on, the one Camille left burning as a second beacon, in addition to the porch light, because one light was never quite enough. She was in the living room with the book she wasn't reading, positioned in the chair that faced the front window, which she would never admit was intentional. Everett Brennan was in the study at the back of the house, at his desk, with a file open in front of him that he was not supposed to discuss with anyone outside of his unit. He was 44 years old. He had worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 22 years, the last 11 of which had been spent in the Undercover Operations Division out of the Columbus Field Office on Corporate Exchange Drive. He was the kind of agent that other agents described in careful, quiet tones. Methodical, unreadable, effective in the specific way that only people who had survived long-term undercover work could be. He had spent months at a time living under names that weren't his. He had sat across tables from people who would have killed him if they knew who he was. He had learned over 2 decades how to control every visible thing about himself. His breathing, his posture, his voice, the exact temperature of his expression. When his phone lit up with Nadine's name at 11:34 p.m., he answered on the second ring. She didn't waste words. "Everett, there's an officer outside. He's got the boys stopped at the end of your driveway." He was already standing. On the stone walkway of 2714 Garfield Crest Drive, Officer Preston Garvey had ordered Callum and Desmond to step apart from each other and place their hands where he could see them. A second unit had been radioed but not yet dispatched. Garvey was running their names they had given him, names attached to the address they had given him. And the system was returning exactly what you would expect it to return for 2 teenagers with no records, no priors, and no reason to be standing anywhere other than exactly where they were standing. He had not acknowledged any of this out loud. Desmond was looking at the porch light. It was the one thing he could find to look at that didn't make the feeling in his chest worse. That single warm bulb, burning the way it always burned, the way his mother always made sure it burned, as if light itself could be a kind of protection. He was trying very hard not to let Officer Garvey see that his hands were shaking. Callum was watching the front door. He didn't know why. It was something he felt before he thought it a pull, like pressure changing before a storm. He watched the navy blue door at the end of the stone walkway, the door he had walked through 10,000 times, and he waited. The handle moved. The front door didn't open all the way. Not yet. It moved just enough to let a slice of warm light fall across the porch, and then it stopped. Callum kept his eyes on it. He didn't call out. He didn't move. He just watched that thin line of light like it was the only steady thing left on the street. Because right now, it was. Officer Preston Garvey didn't notice. He was too busy performing certainty he didn't actually have. He had already run both their names through the system. He had already seen that neither Callum nor Desmond Brennan had a single record attached to them. No priors, no flags, nothing. The address they gave him matched the address the system returned. Everything they had told him had checked out, and he was standing there anyway, one hand near his belt, talking into his radio like the facts in front of him were somebody else's problem. Still waiting on that second unit, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Callum heard him. He didn't respond. He had already learned in the last several minutes that responding to Preston Garvey with the truth was not something Garvey was interested in. Every answer Callum gave him had been met with a longer pause, a harder stare, or a question that ignored the answer entirely. So Callum stood still, kept his hands where they could be seen, and breathed the way his father had once told him to breathe when the world decided to be unfair. Slowly, from the stomach, like you have all the time in the world, even when it feels like you don't. Desmond was not finding it as easy. He was 16 years old, and he was standing in front of his own house. And a man with a badge and a gun was treating him like a suspect. And none of it made any sense that his body could accept, even if his mind understood exactly what was happening. His hands had stopped shaking, but only because he had pressed them flat against his thighs and was holding them there by force of will. He was staring at the porch light the way a person stares at a fixed point when the room is spinning. He was doing everything right. That was the part that kept hitting him. He was doing everything right, and it didn't matter at all. Garvey turned back to them and crossed his arms. "Both of you step away from the walkway, over here by the curb." Callum looked at him. "Why?" "Because I'm asking you to." "We told you who we are," Callum said. "We told you the address. You ran our names. We haven't done anything." Garvey took a step closer. Not aggressive, but deliberate. The kind of step designed to remind you of the distance between what you have and what he has. "I'm not going to ask you again." They walked to the curb. There was nothing else to do. Callum got there first and turned around, so he was still facing the house, still facing that front door with the light behind it. Desmond stood beside him and did the same. Neither of them sat down, even though Garvey gestured toward the curb edge like sitting was expected. They stood. It was the only thing left that still felt like a choice. By this point, Garfield Crest Drive had begun to wake up in the quiet way that neighborhoods wake up when something is wrong. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in stages. A curtain moving in the house 2 doors down. A porch light switching on across the street. The sound of a door opening somewhere behind them and then going soft again, like whoever opened it thought better of stepping out. People were watching. They just weren't sure yet what they were watching, or what, if anything, they were supposed to do about it. Nadine Pryor had already made her decision. She was standing at her upstairs window with her phone in her hand, and she was watching Officer Garvey the way she watched things that made her stomach tighten carefully, without looking away. She had already made the call to Everett. She had already said what she needed to say. Now she was documenting. Her phone camera was up, and she was recording, and she was doing it without any drama because Nadine Pryor was not a dramatic woman. She was a practical one. She understood that what was happening on that walkway was the kind of thing that disappeared without witnesses, and she had decided she would not let it disappear. She wasn't the only one recording. 2 houses down, a younger man named Chris, who had moved on to Garfield Crest the previous spring, had his phone out as well. He didn't know the Brennan family well yet, but he knew enough. He knew those were the Brennan boys. He knew that house was their house. And he knew that what he was looking at didn't sit right in any part of him that understood how a neighborhood was supposed to work. Garvey told them to empty their pockets. Callum looked at him for a long moment before he moved. Then he reached into his jacket and placed his items on the hood of the cruiser one at a time. His phone, his house key, a folded receipt from a gas station on Pembroke Connector where he had bought a bottle of water 3 days ago. Desmond did the same. His phone. A stick of gum still in the wrapper. $7 in cash, folded once. Garvey looked at it all like he was expecting to find something. He picked up each item, turned it over, set it back down. The receipt, the cash, the phones, which he did not attempt to unlock, though something in the way he held them suggested he was considering it. He found nothing because there was nothing to find, and when he was done, he didn't say so. He just stepped back and reached for his radio again. "Still running the description check," he said into it. "Holding 2 at 2714 Garfield Crest." Holding 2. Like they were cargo. Like they were things that had been collected and were now being stored until someone decided what to do with them. Desmond turned his head slightly toward Callum, just enough so that only Callum could hear him. "How long is he going to do this?" Callum didn't answer right away. He was watching the front door again. The light behind it had shifted. Warmer now, fuller, like more lights inside had been turned on. He could see, just barely, the outline of his mother's shape moving behind the frosted glass panel beside the door. She was there, she knew, and she was holding herself back, which he understood was costing her something she would never get to put a number on. "Not much longer," Callum said quietly. He didn't say it to comfort his brother. He said it because the front door was moving again, and this time, it was opening all the way. The porch light fell across the stone walkway. The warm air from inside the house pushed out into the October night. And then, the silhouette of Everett Brennan filled the doorway. Still, unhurried, and completely calm in the way that only a man who has faced genuinely dangerous things can be calm about something like this. Garvey turned at the sound of the door. He didn't know it yet, but the worst decision of his professional life was about to introduce itself. Everett Brennan did not rush. That was the first thing anyone watching would have noticed. He didn't storm out. He didn't raise his voice before he even reached the door. He stepped onto the porch the way a man steps into a room he already owns, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from being calm, but from knowing exactly how much power you're holding and choosing, deliberately, not to show it yet. He was wearing a plain gray Henley, dark pants, and house shoes. No jacket, no badge visible, just a man who looked like he had been sitting at a desk, heard something that required his attention and decided to give it. He stood at the top of the porch steps and took in the full scene in one sweep. His two sons at the curb, their belongings on the hood of a police cruiser. Officer Preston Garvey standing between them and their own front door with his hand near his belt. Everett looked at all of it. He didn't react to any of it, not visibly. He walked down the porch steps. Garvey turned to face him and shifted his weight forward, already loading his voice with the same authority he had been using on the boys. "Sir, I need you to stay on the porch. This is an active... Those are my sons." 3 words. No raised voice, no heat behind them. Just a flat, clean statement of fact delivered in a register so controlled it didn't leave room for interruption or argument. It landed in the space between them and just sat there. Garvey blinked. "Sir, we're conducting a stop. I need you to..." "I heard what you need." Everett was already moving down the walkway at the same unhurried pace. "I need you to tell me why my sons are standing at the curb in front of their home with their belongings on the hood of your vehicle." Garvey stepped slightly to the side, repositioning himself the way people do when they feel a conversation shifting direction and haven't caught up to it yet. "We've had multiple robberies in this area. These individuals matched the description of my sons," Everett said. He stopped walking. He was 6 feet from Garvey now, and he looked at him the way a man looks at something he has already fully assessed and found lacking. "You can say my sons, officer." The street was silent. Nadine's phone was still up across the way. Chris hadn't moved. 3 other neighbors had come to their porches now. Not loudly, not dramatically, just present, watching. The way a community watches when it understands that what is happening in front of it matters. Garvey straightened. "Sir, can I ask your name?" "You can," Everett said. He reached into the front pocket of his pants and produced a credentials wallet, black, worn at the fold from years of use, the kind that opens in a single practiced motion. He held it open and extended it toward Garvey at chest height, steady as a wall. "Special Agent Everett Brennan, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Columbus Field Office." The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was worse than dramatic. It was the silence of a man realizing, in real time, that the ground he was standing on had been hollow the entire time, and he had only just noticed. Garvey looked at the credentials. He looked at the badge. He looked at the photo ID beside it. He looked at all of it for long enough that the looking itself became its own kind of confession. He didn't say anything. Everett didn't move the wallet. He kept it exactly where it was. Open, steady, unhurried. Because he had learned over 22 years that there was a specific kind of accountability that came not from confrontation, but from stillness. From making a person sit inside the truth of what they had done without giving them a way to rush past it. Garvey's hand had moved away from his belt without him seeming to notice it had done so. "I want you to look at my sons," Everett said. His voice was still level, still cold. "Look at them." Garvey's eyes moved toward Callum and Desmond, still standing at the curb. "They told you who they were," Everett continued. They told you the address. You ran their names. You found nothing. And you still put them on that curb and emptied their pockets on the hood of your car in front of this neighborhood. He paused for just a beat. Not for effect, but the way a man pauses when he is making sure every word lands where he intends it to. That wasn't law enforcement. That was something else. And you and I both know what to call it. Garvey opened his mouth. Something came out that was close to the beginning of a sentence. Something about procedure, about matching descriptions, about the robberies. And Everett let him get through exactly 4 words of it before he spoke again. Your body cam is on. Garvey stopped. It has been on since you pulled up to this address. Everett finally closed the credentials wallet and put it back in his pocket, the same smooth motion in reverse. Everything you said to my boys, everything you did, every word you just said to me, it's on that camera. I want you to think about that very carefully before you finish that sentence. Garvey finished nothing. He stood there on the walkway of 2714 Garfield Crest Drive and said nothing. And it was the loudest thing he had done all night. Callum watched his father from the curb and felt something release in his chest. Not relief exactly, but the specific feeling of a weight that had been pressing down finally being named for what it was. Beside him, Desmond let out a long, slow breath. His shoulders dropped half an inch. His hands, which had been pressed flat against his thighs for the better part of 20 minutes, finally relaxed. Everett turned to his sons. He looked at them the way a man looks at the 2 most important things in his life after someone has just reminded him how quickly important things can be taken. He didn't say anything to them either. He didn't need to. He simply stepped to the side of the walkway and extended one arm toward the front door. They walked past him and into the house. Everett turned back to Garvey one last time. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The porch light was behind him and the street was completely still, and every neighbor on Garfield Crest Drive was watching. "You'll be hearing from my attorney?" he said. "Have a good night, officer." He walked inside. The navy blue door closed behind him. Preston Garvey stood alone on the walkway for a long moment. Body cam still running, neighbors still watching. The October night suddenly feeling much colder than it had 20 minutes ago. The body cam footage was not supposed to go public. That was the first thing the Crestwood Police Department said when the story broke. That the footage was part of an internal review, that proper procedure was being followed, that the department took all complaints seriously and asked the public to allow the process to work. It was the kind of statement that police departments have been issuing for decades, built from words carefully chosen to sound like accountability without actually committing to any. It was also, as it turned out, completely useless. Because by the time the department issued it, the footage had already been seen by over 2 million people. Nadine Pryor had recorded 11 minutes of video from her upstairs window. Chris, from 2 doors down, had recorded 9. Between the 2 of them, they had captured the entire stop. Garvey ordering the boys to the curb, the pocket search, the radio calls, and the moment Everett Brennan walked down that stone walkway and held his credentials open in the October night. Someone in the neighborhood had shared Nadine's footage to a private community group. From there, it moved the way things move when they contain something true, fast, and without asking permission. By morning, it was on every major platform. By afternoon, news vans had parked on Garfield Crest Drive. By the following evening, the Crestwood Police Department was no longer controlling the narrative. They were chasing it. The internal review that the department had promised took 9 days. What it found, or rather, what it was forced to confront, was a personnel file that should have raised serious questions long before the night of October 14th. Officer Preston Garvey had 2 prior complaints on record, both filed within the previous 18 months, both involving black men stopped in the Pembroke Hills area without cause, and both marked reviewed with no action taken. A 3rd complaint, filed by a resident on Aldercroft Lane 8 months earlier, had been submitted, logged, and never formally processed. It was sitting in a digital queue when the footage went viral. Investigators found it 4 days into the review. The department placed Garvey on administrative leave 6 days after the incident. They terminated his employment on day 11. The official statement cited conduct unbecoming an officer and failure to follow departmental stop and identify protocols. It did not use the word profiling. It did not need to. Everyone reading it already understood what had happened, and the careful language fooled no one. Garvey's union filed for a grievance hearing within 48 hours of the termination. The hearing was scheduled. It would ultimately go nowhere, but it would take time. And time was one of the things the Brennan family had decided they were no longer willing to give for free. The lawsuit was filed 23 days after the incident by the Brennan family's attorney, a civil rights litigator named Patricia Osei, whose firm operated out of Columbus and had spent the last 14 years handling exactly this kind of case. The filing named Officer Preston Garvey personally, named the Crestwood Police Department, and named the city itself as a defendant on the grounds that the department's pattern of ignoring complaints had created the conditions for what happened on Garfield Crest Drive. That word, pattern, was the one that made the city's legal team uncomfortable in the specific way that lawyers get uncomfortable when they know the other side has done their homework. Because Patricia Osei had done her homework. Her team had filed public records requests for every stop conducted by Crestwood PD in the Pembroke Hills zone over the preceding 3 years. What came back was exactly what anyone paying attention might have expected. A racial disparity in stop rates that the raw numbers made impossible to argue around. Black residents in Pembroke Hills were stopped at a rate 3 times higher than white residents in the same zone, despite accounting for a smaller portion of the area's population. Garvey's stops alone accounted for a disproportionate share of that figure. The city settled 14 months later for an amount that was not disclosed publicly, but was described by sources familiar with the agreement as substantial. As part of the settlement, the Crestwood Police Department agreed to implement mandatory bias training, an independent complaint review process, and a quarterly public report on stop data broken down by race and zone. None of these things brought back the 20 minutes Callum and Desmond had spent on that curb, but they were the kind of changes that meant the next family on the next street might not have to spend them at all. Callum Brennan turned 18 4 months after the incident. He gave a brief statement at a community forum held at Crestwood City Hall, organized by a coalition of Pembroke Hills residents who had decided that watching from windows was no longer enough. He didn't speak for long. He wasn't interested in performing his own pain for an audience. He said that he and his brother had done everything right that night, and that doing everything right had not protected them, and that the only thing that had changed the outcome was a badge that happened to live in the same house they did. He said he didn't think that should be the variable. He said it clearly and without anger and sat back down. Desmond didn't speak at the forum. He didn't need to. He had already said what he needed to say in the only place that felt right. At home, at the dinner table, a week after it happened, when the house was quiet and it was just the 4 of them. And Camille had made the meal she always made when something needed to be gotten through together. He had looked up from his plate and said, "I keep thinking about how I was looking at the porch light." Nobody asked him why. They all already knew. Because the porch light meant they were almost home. And almost, that night, had been the longest distance any of them had ever traveled. If this story stayed with you, share it. Someone in your life needs to see it. And if you're watching on Deep Truth and haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Every story we tell is real, every detail matters, and we're just getting started.